welcome back to CrossFit Milford. Coach Jeff here.
I think you should play that beginning part.
What? Maybe I will.
Okay.
We'll just let the whole thing roll. Welcome back to CrossFit Milford. Coach Jeff here with Coach Jason. We've got a little more information for you this week. As we're preparing for the qualifiers and for regionals, one of our aspects of training is going to be working on our skill work. So we want to talk a little bit with you about that today. We're going to try to define it a little bit, what it means, how we train it, and what it's going to look like for different type of athletes. So I'm just going to fire some questions off at Jay and let him do his thing here. Skill work, what does it mean? We're going to start there. So what does skill work actually mean here, Jay?
So I think I want to answer that question with a question, Jeffrey.
Okay. All right.
And the question I want to ask you is, are you talking about skill work for people going on to regionals and qualifiers, or are you talking about skill work for people who are not going on to the next stage?
Yeah, well, we always have to make this difficult. I was going to make that the third question, like, separating between the three here. But let's talk about skill work for regional athletes, let's say, because that's coming up a little bit sooner than down the road of 2018. But we need to prep some people for the regional qualifiers or the online qualifiers. We need to prep some people for regionals. Let's start there. What is their skill work going to look like?
Yeah, so hopefully all athletes who are advancing to this next stage, they've already done their due diligence from joint integrity, from proper positioning, from proper loading of the muscular fibers. So eccentric, concentric, and isometric, right? So ideally, anybody moving on to this next stage, that position, which in my opinion is skill work, has already been achieved and is still kind of has almost become robotic as far as doing the proper work, so that their joints can sustain volume and prevent injury, right? So now, skill work for athletes moving on to the next stage is a lot of the movements. So if we treat it just like anything like periodization, the beginning stage of training is accumulation. So that's accumulating different patterns within inside the body, fiber loading, fiber firing, movements, planes of movements, etc., right? So skill work in the beginning part of the year is a lot of building your body's ability to sustain the real thing and the high volume thing. As you get into intensity, you are under the assumption that you put in the time in the beginning of the year to accumulate the body's ability to do work and sustain work. And you've mastered the basic foundational principles of movement and movement patterns. So you're able to add that intensity aspect to the mechanics. So now as we transition now, which is like the competition, it really comes down to training the body to be adaptable, training the body through high volume responses, and train the body through different fatigue factors. That, in my opinion, is the skill work that needs to be done now, right? Yes, some athletes might still, everything that needs to be done is, you have your range of motion work, you have your activation work, and you have your movement prep work. You're working on integrity of the shoulder joints, hip joints, knees, to make sure that they can sustain the volume, okay? You're still working on different patterns to kind of offset everything done that's like just up and down or front to back, right? So you're still working different movement patterns, because that's going to build strength and ability to sustain outside work as well. But now what a lot of these athletes have to really train is, okay, let me do higher skill movements under a pre-fatigue state. If I'm doing burpee ring muscle ups, you're training the skill of dropping into a burpee in the right spot, jumping up, grabbing the rings without any extra swing. You're working on dropping down quickly into the next set without having the rings go around crazy. Barbell cycling work, you're working on different adaptability movements based off fatigue factors. So you're working on no foot movement. You're working on maybe not a full hip extension if they're not going to require it. You're working on manipulating arm bends to decrease range of motion, all things that can increase your cycle rate. You're working on your ability to have some sort of cycle rate with a barbell, or to stay with a quicker cycle rate. You're working on lots of pull, push factors, which you're going to see. So lots of the skill work now should mimic things that they've done in the past. You never know what they're going to do in this sport, for the event, whether it's qualifier or the regionals, but you can still train specific skill patterns in the past, and everything is a skill.
Yeah.
If you're a team, you're working on how to transition inside the row and outside the row, how to transition on the assault bike if you have to change the seat, and off the assault bike. You're working on proper movement patterns of transitions of tags. So we're going to the left, we're going to the right. You're working on communicating without communicating. So you're working on not having to say, cue words and wordings where teams can know what different fatigue factors are of other people, so they can adjust and make flies in the call. You're working on manipulating barbell movements to increase cycle rate. You're working on proper body positioning through movements. You're working on things that can make you faster and more efficient while doing movements under fatigue factors. And that's the key to skill work now, because all the foundation has already been laid, right? So now it's like, okay, how can we kind of like put the sprinkles on top of the cake? How can we put the candles on top of the cake? How can we jazz it up, right? So essentially, how we become better at the movements themselves now through different variables that we don't know are going to be.
Right. So how do we put the icing on the cake? How do we practice the skill work?
Yeah, and I think it's different for a lot of athletes, you know. So if we keep it in-house here, the ways that like the Nick Del Grans or the Trevor James, they're practice their skill work differently than one another because they're built differently.
Right.
And then if we take it to like some of our girls, they're gonna practice skill work different than these guys. You know, like some of our girls might have to do more imam fashion. That way, give them some sort of set and rest, so we can make sure that the technique and the outcome of what we're trying to do can be shown.
Yeah.
People like Nick, who's got such a crazy skill base, he's strong as an ox, and he already has this huge engine built up over training for the past couple years, that we can do stuff in more of a fatigued state and still kind of get the effects done of what we're trying to get done. So how you do that, you put them in a setting that's going to allow them to produce the outcome that you want without crushing them.
Right.
Whether so that's EMOMs or whether that's some sort of work to rest ratio, or for some athletes if it's a controlled heart rate style workout where they're able to stay at a steady pace and keep moving, right? And that's not guessing, in my opinion. People will spike at different heart rates differently, they come down for different heart rates differently, so to truly put them in the zone that's going to be efficient for them, you need to know what kind of heart rate needs to be done for them.
Right.
You know, so that's kind of like how you go about it.
Great. So let's fast forward to, you know, when regionals are over, when the games are over, and now everybody's preparing for the 2018 season. Does skill work, is that something that gets factored into their training, or is that just something that they should be aware of and kind of practicing on their own?
Factored in, because people won't practice it on their own.
Okay, so what does that look like? If we're a year out now, you know, the
Yes.
dust is settled in the CrossFit Games, we're a year out, what does skill work look like for the long season?
To me, what skill work should look like right now is structural stability and stabilization.
Okay.
You know, so
it starts there.
it starts there for everything, because even if you're a highly trained athlete and you came off the opens and you didn't make it to regionals, chances are your training lead up to that was a ton of volume, a ton of reps, a ton of snatches and pull-ups and muscle-ups and handstand push-ups and pistols and whatnot. So at this point, your joints need time to chill, or else you're gonna have slap tears, you're gonna have labrum tears, you can have a whole bunch of things if you keep pushing through it.
Right.
Or you just get to an overtrained state. So at this point, those athletes are like, okay, well let's get your scaps moving correctly. Let's work on just kind of slowing everything down. Let's work on holds and eccentrics and concentrics. Like even for butterfly pull-ups, let's work on properly the lowering of the butterfly pull-up, because lots of the times tears happen because you know you just dropping out that quickly and your shoulders out of position, and that's where it's almost like throwing a baseball too fast. And it's where the CrossFit, that's where you see the tears occur. So controlling those movement patterns, holds, carries, working on different movement implications like strongman work, holds, carries, drags, that can put you in a position to have a better structure for skill work. If you're talking about gymnastics, you know, it's going to be more same thing. The muscles get stronger the same way no matter what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
So meaning you have to have strength through the eccentric portion, strength through the isometric portion, strength through the concentric portion.
Yeah.
So what you're trying to do now is you don't need to overload with volume and reps and fatigue factors. Right now it's like stay in a unfatigued state, build your strength through different fiber loading protocols, different movement patterns, different movement planes, and that's going to build your skill work as you start getting into the more the movements themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that some of the stuff, as you say it, will raise more questions. I mean, we talk about stability work, and sometimes athletes may not necessarily know if they're activating things properly, and I think that's a good segue into sending us your feedback. If you have questions, of course, to reach out to us, Jason at CrossFitMilford.com, Jeff at CrossFitMilford.com, because we can answer those questions a little more fully if you do have follow-ups. Don't forget to join us at competitors.crossfitmilford.com for your training protocols and for your competitor training. And like I said, reach out to us for any further questions. But I hope that helps on skill work and just gives you a little more awareness and something to think about as we go forward, whether it be to regionals to the Masters qualifier, or if you're getting prepped up for your 2018 season. So that's it from us today, and we'll see you soon. Thanks guys.
How now, brown cow?